Throw her in a he. Sergeant Briggs barked, shoving Carmen Hayes straight into the dirt ring, where a 90-pound Belgian Malinois was already snarling, teeth-bared, chain pulled tight. The SEALs erupted in laughter. They wanted blood. They wanted to watch the new girl scream, crawl, and beg to be pulled out. Briggs crossed his arms and grinned because in his mind, this woman had no business wearing that uniform, and he was going to prove it in front of every man on that base. But what Briggs didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Carmen Hayes had spent 8 years controlling the most dangerous military dogs on the planet. And the animal they just unleashed on her, she'd trained its bloodline herself. Before you hear what happened next, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel and follow Carmen's story all the way to the end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see just how far this story travels. The morning Carmen Hayes arrived at Naval Special Warfare Group 3, not a single soul looked her in the eye. She stepped off the transport with her bag over one shoulder and her orders folded in her breast pocket, and the first thing she heard was somebody laughing. Not the friendly kind, the kind that tells you you've already been judged. "That's her," a voice said from behind the equipment shed. "That's the replacement they sent us." Carmen didn't turn around. She kept walking toward the main building, boots crunching gravel, jaw set tight. She'd heard worse. She'd heard it at boot camp, at K-9 school, at every single posting where she walked in and somebody decided she didn't belong before she'd even opened her mouth. Inside the operations building, a clerk pointed her down a hallway without a word. She found the office at the end, knocked twice, and waited. "Enter." Lieutenant Commander Rawlings sat behind a metal desk covered in paperwork. He was mid-50s, gray at the temples, with the kind of face that looked like it had been carved out of a bad mood. He glanced up at her, then back down at his file. "Hayes." "Yes, sir." "You're the dog handler." "K-9 tactical specialist, sir. 8 years with the—" "I know what the file says." Rawlings closed the folder and leaned back. "What the file doesn't tell me is whether you can survive this team. These men are not going to roll out a welcome mat for you. You understand that?" "I understand that, sir." "Do you—" He stared at her for a long time. "Because Sergeant Briggs has already filed a formal objection to your assignment. He doesn't want you here. Half the team doesn't want you here. And I'll be honest with you, Hayes, I wasn't consulted either." Carmen felt the words land, but she didn't flinch. "Permission to speak freely, sir." "Go ahead." "I didn't ask to be wanted. I asked to be assigned. I'll earn everything else." Rawlings studied her for another moment, then nodded slowly. "Report to the K-9 compound at 0600 tomorrow. Briggs runs morning training. Don't be late." Carmen saluted and turned to leave. As she reached the door, Rawlings spoke again. "Hayes, watch your back out there." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. That night, Carmen sat alone in the barracks they'd assigned her. A room at the far end of the building separated from the rest of the team by a storage closet and what felt like 1,000 miles of silence. She unpacked methodically. Uniforms. Gear. A small leather case that held her K-9 training tools. The whistle, the clicker, the worn leather lead she'd carried through 3 deployments. At the bottom of her bag, wrapped in a soft cloth, was a photograph. Her and a dog named Atlas, taken in Afghanistan 4 years ago. Atlas had saved her life twice. She'd saved his once. He was retired now, living with her mother in Virginia, and every time Carmen looked at that photo, she remembered why she did this work. She placed the photo on the small desk beside her bunk and stared at it for a long time. "You'd hate this place, buddy," she whispered. "But you'd love what I'm about to do." 0545 the next morning, Carmen was already at the K-9 compound when the rest of the team started filtering in. The compound was a fenced area behind the main training field with kennels, obstacle courses, and a dirt ring used for controlled aggression exercises. 6 Belgian Malinois were housed in individual runs, each one a precision weapon wrapped in fur and muscle. Carmen stood near this fence watching the dogs. She could read them already. The one in Kennel 3 was anxious pacing. Kennel 5 held a dominant male who pressed against the chain link with his ears forward and his tail high. In Kennel 1, the closest to her, housed a female that sat perfectly still, watching Carmen with intelligent, measuring eyes. "You're the calm one," Carmen murmured. "You're the leader." "Hey, new girl." Carmen turned. Sergeant Briggs was walking toward her with 4 other SEALs trailing behind him like a pack of their own. Briggs was built like a fire hydrant, short, thick, and impossible to knock over. His face wore a permanent sneer that looked like it had been installed at the factory. You're early, he said like it was an accusation. Yes, Sergeant. Don't call me Sergeant. Call me Briggs. Everyone here calls me Briggs. He looked her up and down with undisguised contempt. So you're the dog whisperer they sent us. K9 tactical specialist. Yeah, sure. He turned to his men. Boys, say hello to our new specialist. The SEALs gave her various forms of acknowledgement. A grunt. One of them, a tall operator named Decker, actually said welcome. The others looked away. All right, here's how this works, Briggs said, stepping closer to Carmen. Close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath. This is my compound. These are my bonds. You're here because some pencil pusher at SOCOM decided we needed a dedicated handler, and I got overruled. But make no mistake, Hayes, you don't give orders here. You don't touch a mat without my say-so, and you sure as hell don't tell any of my men how to do their jobs. Are we clear? Crystal clear, Briggs. Good. He turned away from her and whistled sharply. Ramirez, bring out Coda. A handler named Ramirez jogged to Kennel 5 and opened the gate. The dominant male Carmen had noticed earlier came charging out all controlled fury and rippling muscle. Coda was magnificent, 85 pounds of pure aggression channeled through months of bite work training. Ramirez held the lead tight as the dog lunged and barked, eyes locked on the group. Coda's our #1 bite dog, Briggs said, turning back to Carmen with a grin that made her stomach tighten. Fastest engagement time on the base, 0 to throat in under 3 seconds. He paused. You ever worked a dog like that, Hayes? I've worked dogs that would make Coda look like a house pet. The silence that followed was deafening. Every SEAL in that compound stopped what they were doing. Briggs's grin disappeared like someone had wiped it off with a rag. What did you say? I said I've worked tougher dogs. That's not a criticism of Coda. He's a fine animal. But I've been in the field with dogs that were trained to clear buildings in complete darkness against armed combatants. So yes, Briggs, I've seen worse. Briggs stepped so close their boots were almost touching. You've got a real mouth on you, Hayes. I've got experience. There's a difference. For a moment, Carmen thought he might actually take a swing at her. His fists were clenched, his neck was red, and the veins along his temples were standing at attention. But Briggs was smarter than that. He was cruel, but he was calculating. He smiled, and that smile terrified Carmen more than any threat he could have made. All right, specialist, he said softly. Let's see that experience in action. Boys, he raised his voice. Change of plans for morning PT. We're doing a live K9 engagement drill, and our new specialist here is going to be the decoy. Decker spoke up immediately. Briggs, she hasn't been briefed on. Did I ask you, Decker? Decker shut his mouth, but Carmen saw the concern in his eyes. He knew what was happening. They all knew. A K9 engagement drill with a live decoy required a bite suit, a briefing, a safety officer, and a handler who knew the release command. Briggs was stripping all of that away. He wanted Carmen in the ring with Coda unprotected, unprepared, and completely at the dog's mercy. Get in the ring, Hayes. Carmen looked at the dirt ring, looked at Coda, who was now pulling so hard against his lead that Ramirez was leaning back with both hands. Then she looked at Briggs. No bite suit, she asked calmly. You said you've worked tougher dogs. Figured you wouldn't need one. That's against regulation and you know it. File a complaint. Briggs leaned in. Or get in the ring and show us what SOCOM's money bought. Every eye was on her. Carmen could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest like a boot. If she refused, she was done. Not officially, not on paper, but in the eyes of these men, she would be finished. The new girl who talked big and folded when it counted. Briggs would make sure that story followed her for the rest of her career. If she went in, she could get hurt. Badly. Coda was trained to bite and hold, and without a suit that meant torn flesh, broken bones, and a medevac helicopter. Carmen unzipped her jacket and handed it to Decker. Hold this for me, she said. Decker took it with wide eyes. Hayes, you don't have to. I know. She walked to the ring. The gate was a simple latch on a chain link enclosure, maybe 30 feet across. She stepped inside and closed it behind her. The dirt was loose under her boots. Her heart was hammering, but her hands were steady. Briggs walked Ramirez and Coda to the opposite gate. The dog was in a frenzy now, barking, lunging saliva flying from his jaws. Every instinct in Carmen's body screamed at her to back up, to put distance between herself and that animal. She stepped forward instead. "Release him," she said. Briggs looked at Ramirez and nodded. Ramirez unclipped the lead. Coda exploded forward. 90 pounds of trained aggression hurtling across 30 feet of dirt like a guided missile. The SEALs watching from outside the fence went quiet, dead quiet. The kind of silence that comes right before something terrible happens. Carmen planted her feet. She took one deep breath, and then in a voice so low that only the dog could hear it, she spoke. "Coda, stay." The German command hit the dog like an invisible wall. His front paws dug into the dirt. His hindquarters dropped. He skidded forward another 2 feet and stopped his nose inches from Carmen's knee. His body was trembling with redirected energy, every muscle coiled, but he did not move. He did not bite. He sat. And then he looked up at Carmen with something that every dog handler in the world recognizes. Obedience. Pure, trained, unshakable obedience. The compound was so silent you could hear the wind. "What the hell?" somebody whispered. Carmen didn't move. She kept her eyes locked on Coda's, her posture calm, her breathing controlled. Slowly, deliberately, she extended her right hand palm down and held it 6 inches from the dog's nose. "Braver, Hund," she said softly. "Good dog." Coda sniffed her hand once, then pressed his head against her palm. His tail moved just once, a single wag. But it was enough. Briggs was frozen at the gate. His face had gone from smug to confused to something Carmen had never expected to see on that man's face. Fear. Not fear of the tongue, fear of what had just happened to his authority. "How did you?" he started. "His commands are in German," Carmen said, her voice carrying across the silent compound. "Standard Schutzhund protocol. Whoever trained him started with German command structure before transitioning to English tactical commands. The English overlay is solid, but the foundation is still there. Always will be." She looked directly at Briggs. "I know this because I've trained over 200 military working dogs. I know the command structure of every program the Department of Defense has run in the last decade. I know what language they started in, what commands they respond to under stress, and what triggers their prey drive versus their defense drive." Coda pressed closer to her leg. Without looking down, Carmen rested her hand on his head. "And I know Coda specifically," she continued, "because his sire was a dog named Falco out of the Holland program. I was on the selection team that evaluated Falco's first litter for military service. Coda was one of 3 puppies that made the cut." She paused. "I held him when he was 6 weeks old." The silence that followed was not the awkward silence of before. It was the silence of men recalibrating everything they thought they knew. Decker was the first to speak. "You've got to be kidding me." "I don't kid about dogs, Decker." Briggs found his voice, but it had lost its edge. "That doesn't mean anything. Any handler could have looked up his pedigree." "You're right," Carmen said. "Any handler could have looked up his pedigree, but could any handler have stopped him mid-charge without a suit, without a lead, and without laying a single hand on him?" She let the question hang. "Because I just did." Briggs opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. From the back of the group, a voice cut through the tension like a blade. "What is going on here?" Everyone snapped to attention. Lieutenant Commander Rawlings was striding across the compound, his face dark with fury. Behind him was a man Carmen had never seen, tall, silver-haired, wearing a uniform with enough insignia to make the entire team nervous. "Sir," Briggs started, "did you put a member of this unit into a live K9 ring without protective equipment?" Rawlings was not asking. He was confirming what he already knew. "Did you release an attack-trained Malinois on an unprepared operator?" "Sir, it was a test of... It was a court-martial offense is what it was, Sergeant." The silver-haired officer stepped forward. His name tag read Colonel Marcus Whitfield, and his eyes moved from Briggs to Carmen to the dog sitting perfectly calm at her side. "Is this Hayes?" Whitfield asked. "Yes, sir," Rawlings answered. Whitfield looked at Carmen with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You're the one from the Cerberus program." The word hit the compound like a thunderclap. Carmen saw Decker's eyes go wide. Even Briggs took a half step back. "Yes, sir," Carmen said. "You were at the Abbottabad compound simulation." "I was, sir." "And the Raqqa clearance operation." "Also correct, sir." Whitfield turned to Briggs with a look that could have peeled paint off a battleship. "Sergeant, do you have any idea who you just threw into a ring with a dog?" Briggs said nothing. This woman, Whitfield said, pointing at Carmen, has more operational K-9 experience than your entire unit combined. The Cerberus program is the most classified K-9 warfare initiative in the United States military. The handlers who come out of that program don't just control dogs, Sergeant. They deploy them in situations that would make your worst nightmare look like a training exercise. Whitfield stepped closer to Briggs, and his voice dropped to a register that made the air feel heavier. You tried to humiliate a Cerberus handler with her own discipline. That's not just stupid, Briggs, it's embarrassing. Briggs's face was the color of raw meat. His jaw was working, but no words were coming out. For the first time since Carmen had arrived, he looked small. Whitfield turned back to Carmen. Hayes, are you injured? No, sir. Is the dog secure? Carmen looked down at Coda, who was now lying at her feet with his chin on his paws, completely relaxed. He's fine, sir. Better than fine. He's well trained, just poorly handled. That last word landed like a grenade at Briggs's feet. Carmen hadn't meant it as an insult. It was a clinical observation. But it stung, and everyone knew it. Rawlings took control. Briggs, my office. Now, the rest of you stand down. As Briggs walked past Carmen, he didn't look at her, but she heard him speak under his breath just loud enough for her to catch. This isn't over. Carmen looked down at Coda. The dog's eyes were still on her, calm, trusting, steady. She scratched behind his ear and felt him lean into her hand. No, she whispered back. It's not. After Briggs disappeared into the operations building with Rawlings, the compound slowly came back to life. The other handlers returned to their dogs. Equipment was checked, routines resumed, but something had shifted, something invisible but heavy like the air pressure before a storm. Decker walked over to Carmen and handed back her jacket. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the dumbest. Can it be both? Decker almost smiled. Almost. Look, I'm not going to pretend I was rooting for you before today. I didn't know what to expect. But what you just did with Coda, he shook his head. I've been working with that dog for 3 months, and I've never seen him stop like that for anyone. He was trained right, Carmen said. The foundation is solid. He just needs a handler who speaks his language. And that's you. That's me. Decker studied her for a moment. Briggs isn't going to let this go. You know that. What you did in that ring didn't just prove you belong here. It made him look like a fool in front of a colonel. That's not something a man like Briggs forgives. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Then what are you asking for? Carmen looked across the compound at the kennels, at the dogs, at the obstacle course, at the ring where she'd just faced down an attack dog with nothing but her voice. A chance, she said. Same thing I've been asking for my entire career. Decker nodded. He reached out and gave Coda a pat on the side. The dog accepted it, but didn't take his eyes off Carmen. Well, specialist, Decker said. I'd say you've got one. Whether you survive it is another question. He walked away, and Carmen stood alone in the compound with the Coda at her side. The sun was climbing higher, burning off the morning fog, and the base was waking up around her. Somewhere in the operations building, Briggs was getting chewed out by Rawlings. And somewhere above that, Colonel Whitfield was making phone calls that would change the trajectory of Carmen's assignment in ways she couldn't yet imagine. But right now in this moment, Carmen Hayes was exactly where she was supposed to be. Standing on hostile ground, surrounded by men who either doubted her or feared what she represented, with a dog pressed against her leg, who had decided in the span of a single heartbeat that she was worth trusting. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small treat, the kind she always carried. Coda took it gently from her fingers. You and me, buddy, she said quietly. We're going to change some minds around here. Coda's tail wagged once. Carmen Hayes had won the first battle. But the war for respect, for trust, for her place on this team, that war was just getting started. And somewhere in the back of her mind, underneath the adrenaline and the relief and the quiet pride, a voice reminded her of something her first instructor at Cerberus had told her years ago. The dog will always tell you the truth. It's the people you have to worry about. She looked toward the operations building one more time. Briggs was still inside, and Carmen knew with absolute certainty that he was already planning his next move. Briggs walked out of Rawlings' office 40 minutes later, and the first thing Carmen noticed was that he wasn't broken. He wasn't humbled. He wasn't even angry in the way she expected. He was calm, and that calmness scared her more than anything he'd done in the ring. He crossed the compound without looking at her, without looking at anyone. He walked straight to the equipment shed, disappeared inside, and closed the door behind him. The SEALs exchanged glances. Decker, who was running Coda through a basic recall drill near the obstacle course, stopped and watched Briggs's path with narrow eyes. "That's not good," he muttered. Carmen heard him. "What do you mean?" "When Briggs comes out screaming, "You're fine," that means he got it out of his system. When he comes out quiet like that," Decker shook his head, "that means he's building something. And whatever he builds, it's going to be worse than anything he does in the moment." Carmen said nothing. She knelt beside Coda and ran her hand along his flank, feeling the dog's muscles relax under her touch. Coda had been glued to her side since the ring incident, following her around the compound like she'd been his handler for years. The other dogs in the kennels watched them, ears up, curious. "Hayes," a voice from behind her. She turned to find a seal she hadn't spoken to yet, a compact, dark-haired operator named Vasquez. He had a toothpick in his mouth and a look on his face that sat somewhere between suspicion and curiosity. "Vasquez," she said, reading his name tape. "That thing you did with Coda, the German command. How'd you know that would work?" "Because I know dogs." "That's not an answer." Carmen stood up. "Every military working dog starts with a foundation language. For most European-bred dogs in the DoD pipeline, that's German. The English commands get layered on top during tactical training, but under extreme stress, a dog reverts to its foundation. Coda was in full prey drive when he charged me. His brain was running on instinct, not training. So I bypassed the English overlay and went straight to the root command." Vasquez stared at her. "You figured all that out in 3 seconds." "I figured it out the moment I saw him in the kennel. The charge just confirmed it." Vasquez pulled the toothpick from his mouth and pointed it at her. "Okay, I'll give you that one. But Briggs has been running dogs on this team for 6 years. You just walked in here and made him look like an amateur in front of a colonel. That's not something this team is going to forget." "I didn't make him look like anything. He put me in that ring. I survived it, that's all." "That's not all, and you know it." Vasquez lowered his voice. "Around here, respect doesn't come from being right. It comes from knowing when to let somebody else be right. Briggs is wrong about a lot of things, but he's still the one these guys follow. You just knocked him off his pedestal. Now you've got to figure out what happens next." He walked away before Carmen could respond. She stood there with Coda at her heel and Vasquez's words settling into her gut like stones. He wasn't wrong. She'd won the confrontation, but winning and surviving were 2 different games. And the game she was playing now had rules that nobody was going to explain to her. By noon, the compound had returned to something resembling normal operations. The handlers ran their dogs through standard drills. Equipment was cleaned and cataloged. Briggs had emerged from the equipment shed and was supervising from a distance, speaking to no one, watching everything. Carmen spent the morning reviewing the K9 unit's training logs. What she found made her stomach turn. The records were incomplete. Vaccination schedules were weeks behind. 2 of the 6 dogs hadn't been evaluated for stress indicators in over 4 months. And the bite work protocols Briggs had been running were outdated by at least 2 years, using pressure techniques that every modern canine behavioral study had flagged as counterproductive. She brought the files to Rawlings. "Sir, I need to talk to you about the training protocols." Rawlings looked up from his desk. He looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from spending a morning doing damage control. "Hayes, if this is about Briggs..." "It's about the dog, sir," he paused. "Go ahead." The training logs show significant gaps in medical evaluations, stress assessments, and protocol updates. 2 of the dogs, Reaper and Athena, haven't been screened for cortisol levels since January. Coda's bite work sessions are averaging 3 times the recommended weekly frequency, which puts him at risk for behavioral breakdown. And the aggression protocols Briggs is using were phased out of the Cerberus program 2 years ago because they increase handler-directed aggression over time. Rawlings leaned back. "Are you telling me my dogs are a liability?" "I'm telling you that if these protocols continue within 6 months, at least 2 of these dogs will wash out of service. And if Coda keeps getting overstimulated in bite work without proper decompression intervals, he's going to redirect on a handler. Not because he's a bad dog, because he's being pushed past his threshold." Rawlings was quiet for a long time. Carmen could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. He was weighing her credibility against the disruption her recommendations would cause. He was weighing the risk of ignoring her against the risk of undermining Briggs further. "Put it in writing," he finally said. "A full assessment. Every dog. I want it on my desk by Friday." "Yes, sir." "And Hayes," he caught her eye, Be thorough, but be diplomatic. I've already got one fire to put out. I don't need another. Carmen left his office and walked straight into Briggs. He was standing in the hallway, leaning against the wall like he'd been waiting for her. His arms were crossed, his expression unreadable. Running to the boss already, he said quietly. Doing my job. Your job. He let the words hang. You've been here less than 24 hours, and you're already rewriting my program. Your program has gaps, Briggs. The dogs are fine. They've been fine for 6 years under my watch. 6 years, Hayes. You know how many missions these dogs have supported. How many lives they've saved. I know that past performance doesn't prevent future failure. I'm not attacking your record. I'm identifying risk. Briggs pushed off the wall and stepped toward her. Not threatening, not exactly, but close enough to make the hallway feel very small. Let me tell you what I see when I look at you, Hayes. I see someone who learned everything from a textbook. Someone who went through a fancy classified program and came out thinking she knows more than the people who've been doing this in the real world in the dirt under fire. You stopped Coda in a ring. Congratulations. But a ring isn't Fallujah. A ring isn't Kandahar. A ring isn't the middle of the night in a compound full of hostiles where the only thing between you and a bullet is the dog at your side and the man behind you. He leaned in. You want to talk about risk. The biggest risk on this team right now is you, because you're dividing us, and a divided team gets people killed. He walked away before she could answer. Carmen stood in that empty hallway and felt the walls pressing in. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the effort of holding back everything she wanted to say. She wanted to tell Briggs about the night in Raqqa when her dog cleared 3 rooms in total darkness, while she followed with nothing but a pistol and a prayer. She wanted to tell him about the IED that killed 2 Marines 10 feet in front of her, while her K9 alerted on a secondary device that would have killed 6 more. She wanted to tell him about Atlas, about the bond that saved her life, about the nights she still woke up reaching for a dog that wasn't there. But she didn't, because Vasquez was right. Being right wasn't enough. Not here. That afternoon, Colonel Whitfield requested a private meeting with Carmen. She reported to a temporary office on the 2nd floor of the operations building where Whitfield was reviewing files with a female officer Carmen didn't recognize. Hayes, take a seat. Whitfield gestured to a chair. This is Captain Diana Mercer, Joint Special Operations K9 Division. Mercer nodded at Carmen. She was in her 40s, sharp-featured with the look of someone who had spent her career fighting the same battles Carmen was fighting now. I've read your Cerberus file, Mercer said without preamble. Impressive doesn't begin to cover it. Top scores in behavioral assessment, K9 tactical deployment, and field medicine. You were the youngest handler to complete the advanced program, and you were recommended for a command track before you requested a field assignment instead. I go where the dogs go, ma'am. Mercer smiled thinly. I know the feeling. She opened a folder and slid it across the table, which is why I'm here. What I'm about to tell you is classified. Colonel Whitfield has authorized this briefing based on what happened this morning and based on a recommendation that came in from SOCOM 6 months ago. Carmen looked at the folder but didn't touch it. What recommendation? Whitfield spoke. 6 months ago, SOCOM initiated a review of all Special Operations K9 programs. The findings were not encouraging. Handler attrition is up. Dog washout rates are at an all-time high. And there have been 3 incidents in the last year where improperly managed K9 assets redirected aggression toward friendly operators in the field. Carmen felt a chill. Redirected aggression in the field means dogs biting their own handlers during live operations. Mercer finished. 1 operator lost partial use of his hand. Another required emergency surgery in theater. The 3rd incident is still classified, but I can tell you it resulted in a mission failure and a formal investigation. Carmen's mind raced. Redirected aggression in a training environment was dangerous. In a combat zone, it was catastrophic. A dog that turns on its handler in the middle of an operation doesn't just injure one person, it compromises the entire team. These incidents, Carmen said carefully, were they linked to specific training protocols? That's exactly what the review found, Whitfield said. Outdated aggression protocols, insufficient decompression, overstimulation during bite work. Sound familiar? Carmen thought of Coda, thought of the training log she'd just reviewed, thought of Briggs running that dog 3 times the recommended frequency. You're describing what's happening here, she said. We're describing what's happening at 12 different special operations units across the military, Mercer corrected. This base just happens to be one of them, and you just happen to be the person we've been looking for. Mercer slid the folder closer. Open it. Carmen opened the folder. Inside was a single-page document with a project designation she didn't recognize. Project Guardian. Below the heading was a mission brief that made her breath catch in her throat. We're standing up a new K9 program, Whitfield said. Not a training school, not a review board, a forward-deployed unit that pairs elite handlers with special operations teams in the field. Handlers who can assess, correct, and optimize K9 assets in real time during active operations. You want handlers embedded with SEAL teams, Carmen said. We want you embedded with this SEAL team, Mercer said, as a proof of concept. If it works here, we scale it across the community. If it doesn't, the program dies and we go back to the status quo. Carmen stared at the document. Briggs will never accept this. Briggs doesn't have a choice, Whitfield said. This comes from above his pay grade, above Rawlings's pay grade, above mine, frankly. The decision has been made. The only question is whether you're willing to be the one who executes it. And if I say yes, what happens to Briggs? Whitfield and Mercer exchanged a glance. Briggs stays, Mercer said. He's too experienced to remove, and pulling him would destabilize the team. You'll have to work alongside him, but your authority over the K9 program will be independent of his chain of command. You'll report directly to me. Carmen closed the folder. Her heart was pounding, but her voice was steady. So I'll have authority over the dogs, but not the men. That's correct. And the men follow Briggs. Also correct. Then you're asking me to change a culture from the inside without the power to actually enforce the change. Mercer leaned forward. I'm asking you to do what you did in that ring this morning. Lead by example. Prove that your way works. And let the results speak louder than Briggs's ego. Carmen sat with that for a long moment. She thought about every handler she trained with who had burned out, washed out, or walked away because the system didn't want to change. She thought about the system that had been broken by bad protocols and the operators who had paid the price. She thought about Atlas retired and safe in Virginia because she had done everything right. I'll do it, she said. Good. Whitfield stood. You start immediately. Full assessment of all 6 dogs by Friday. Revised training protocols by the following Monday. And Hayes, he looked at her with something that might have been respect or might have been warning. Don't give Briggs a reason to come after you, because he will look for one. Carmen walked out of that meeting with the folder tucked under her arm and a weight on her shoulders that felt heavier than anything she'd carried in the field. She was no longer just the new girl trying to earn a spot. She was now the face of a program that threatened everything Briggs had built, everything he believed in, everything he controlled. She was halfway across the compound when Decker fell into step beside her. I heard Whitfield pulled you in. Word travels fast. This is a SEAL base. Word travels at the speed of gossip, which is faster than light. He glanced at the folder. Whatever that is, I'm guessing it's about to make your life a lot harder. You'd be right. Need help. Carmen stopped walking. She looked at Decker, really looked at him for the first time. He was tall, steady-eyed, with the kind of face that said he'd seen enough to know when something mattered. He wasn't offering help out of sympathy. He was offering because he'd seen what she could do, and he'd made a decision. Why, she asked. Because Coda hasn't left your side all day, and I trust that dog's judgment more than I trust most people's. Carmen almost laughed. Almost. All right, Decker, tomorrow morning 0530, meet me at the kennels. We're going to evaluate every dog on this base, and I need someone who knows their histories. I'll be there. He walked away, and Carmen watched him go. One ally, in a compound full of men who either doubted her or actively wanted her gone. She had one ally and a dog. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That evening, Carmen sat in her quarters with the Project Guardian file open on her desk and the training logs spread around her like a map of everything that was broken. She worked for hours cross-referencing veterinary records with training schedules, behavioral assessments, with deployment histories, handler notes with incident reports. The picture that emerged was damning. Coda wasn't the only dog being pushed too hard. Reaper, the largest Malinois in the unit, had shown escalating signs of stress-related aggression over the past 3 months. His handler notes read like a countdown to disaster. slower to release on out command, required additional correction during bite work, showed teeth during kennel approach. Each entry was a red flag and each one had been ignored. Athena, the female in Kennel 1, the calm one Carmen had noticed on her first morning, was a different kind of problem. Her records showed a dramatic drop in drive over the past 6 weeks. She was withdrawing, refusing to engage in training, spending hours in her kennel lying flat. Classic signs of learned helplessness. Someone had overcorrected her and now she was shutting down. Carmen wrote notes until her hand cramped. She was deep into Athena's file when a knock came at her door. She opened it to find Ramirez standing in the hallway, the handler who had released Coda that morning. He was young, maybe 24, with the nervous energy of someone who had something to say and wasn't sure he should say it. "Ramirez, it's late." "I know, I'm sorry. Can I talk to you for a minute?" Carmen stepped aside and let him in. He stood just inside the door, shifting his weight, not quite meeting her eyes. "What's on your mind?" "Athena." He said the name like it hurt. "She's my dog, my primary assignment. And he swallowed. "She's not right. She hasn't been right for a while." "I know. I've been reading her file." "The file doesn't tell the whole story." Ramirez finally looked at her. His eyes were wet. "Briggs took over her aggression training about 2 months ago. Said I was being too soft with her, that she needed more pressure to build drive. He started running her through high-stress scenarios, loud noises, multiple decoys, back-to-back sessions. I told him she was shutting down. I told him she needed recovery time. He said I didn't know what I was talking about. And now she won't even come out of her kennel for me." His voice broke on the last word. "She just lies there. She won't eat. She won't play. She won't do anything, and I don't know how to fix it." Carmen felt something shift inside her chest. This was why she was here. Not for the politics, not for the power struggle, not for Project Guardian. This, a young handler standing in her doorway at 10 o'clock at night with tears in his eyes because someone had broken his dog and he didn't know how to put her back together. "Ramirez, look at me." He looked. "Athena is not broken. She's protecting herself. What Briggs did pushed her past her threshold, and she shut down because that was the only way she could cope. But shutdown is not permanent. It's a defense mechanism, and defense mechanisms can be reversed with time, patience, and the right approach. Can you help her?" "I can, but I need you to do exactly what I say, even when it feels wrong, even when it feels like nothing is happening. Can you do that?" "Yes, anything." "We start tomorrow. 05:30. Bring her favorite toy, not the training equipment. Her favorite toy, whatever she loved before all this started." "A tennis ball," Ramirez said immediately. "She used to go crazy for a tennis ball." "Then bring one." And Ramirez, "Yeah, don't tell Briggs." He nodded and left. Carmen closed the door and leaned against it, eyes closed, heart hammering. She had just drawn another line in the sand. Every time she helped a dog on this base, she was undercutting Briggs's authority. Every correction she made was an indictment of his methods, and every handler who came to her instead of him was a crack in the foundation of his control. Briggs would find out. He always did. And when he did, whatever was coming next would make the ring incident look like a handshake. Carmen picked up Atlas's photograph and held it against her chest. "I know what I'm doing," she whispered to the dog in the picture. "I just hope it's enough." She set the photo back on the desk, turned off the light, and lay in the dark, listening to the distant sound of dogs barking in their kennels. Somewhere out there, Athena was lying silent in the dark too, waiting for someone to tell her it was safe to be brave again. Carmen closed her eyes. Tomorrow the real work begins. Carmen was at the kennels at 05:15, 15 minutes before she told Decker and Ramirez to arrive. She needed the silence. She needed to stand in front of Athena's kennel and see the dog for herself without anyone watching, without anyone interpreting, without anyone telling her what they thought was wrong. Athena was lying on her side in the back corner of the kennel, not sleeping. Her eyes were open, fixed on nothing dull as river stones. Her body was flat against the concrete, pressed down like she was trying to disappear into the floor. When Carmen knelt at the kennel gate, Athena didn't lift her head, didn't flick an ear, didn't acknowledge her presence at all. Carmen had seen this before. In Afghanistan, she'd worked with a dog named Sable, who had been run through too many explosive detection drills in a single week. Sable stopped eating, stopped responding, just lay in her crate and stared. The other handlers had written her off. Carmen had spent 3 weeks on the ground with that dog rebuilding trust one breath at a time. Sable went on to complete 47 successful detection missions. "I see you, girl," Carmen whispered through the chain link, "and I'm not going anywhere." Athena blinked once, that was all, but it was enough. Decker arrived at 5:28, coffee in hand, looking like a man who had committed to something he wasn't entirely sure about. "All right, specialist, I'm here. What's the plan?" "We evaluate all 6 dogs, full behavioral assessment, drive levels, stress indicators, handler responsiveness, threshold testing. I need you to run each dog through a standard obedience sequence while I observe and take notes. That'll take all morning. That's why we're starting early." Ramirez showed up at 5:30 on the dot, tennis ball in his jacket pocket, dark circles under his eyes that said he hadn't slept. He looked at Carmen with the kind of hope that made her chest hurt, because she knew how fragile that hope was. "We'll get to Athena," she told him quietly, "but she goes last. I need to see the other dogs first, so I have a baseline." Ramirez nodded. He understood, or at least he trusted her enough to pretend he did. They started with a dog named Gunner, a 3-year-old Malinois with a solid prey drive and good handler responsiveness. Decker ran him through sit-down heel recall and a controlled bite work sequence on a tug toy. Carmen watched from 10 feet away, clipboard in hand, noting every micro-expression, every ear position, every shift in body weight. Gunner was fine. Healthy drive, good recovery, no signs of chronic stress. She marked him green. Next was Shadow, a Dutch Shepherd mix who was quieter than the Malinois, but no less capable. Shadow showed slight hesitation on the recall, a half-second delay that most handlers would miss. Carmen didn't miss it. She noted it as a yellow flag, not critical, but worth monitoring. Reaper was third, and Reaper was a problem. The moment Decker brought him out of the kennel, Carmen could see it. The dog's pupils were dilated. His body was rigid, tail high, and stiff ears locked forward. He wasn't alert. He was wired. There's a difference between a dog that's ready to work and a dog that's living in a permanent state of fight or flight, and Reaper had crossed that line weeks ago. "Easy," Decker said, as Reaper lunged against the lead. "Easy, boy." "Stop," Carmen said. Decker looked at her. "What?" "Don't run him through the sequence. Just hold him. Let me watch." Decker held the lead while Carmen circled Reaper at a distance of about 8 feet. The dog tracked her every movement, not with curiosity, but with threat assessment. His lip curled twice. A low growl rumbled in his chest when she moved to his left side. "He's showing lateral aggression on the left," Carmen said. "That means someone has been applying leash corrections from that side. Hard ones. Repeatedly." Decker's jaw tightened. "Briggs works him from the left." "I figured," Carmen made a note. "Reaper's cortisol levels are through the roof. I'd bet money his resting heart rate is 20 beats above normal. He's not a working dog right now, Decker. He's a bomb with a pulse. Can you fix him? I can start, but he needs to come off bite work immediately. No aggression training for a minimum of 2 weeks. Decompression protocol. Scent work only. Free play. Socialization. His nervous system needs to reset. Briggs will never agree to that. Briggs doesn't get a vote, not anymore." Decker raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He knew about Project Guardian. The whole base would know by the end of the day. They moved through Thor and Coda. Thor was solid, a veteran dog with years of deployment experience and the calm demeanor of an animal who had seen everything and feared nothing. Coda, still gravitating toward Carmen whenever she was near, tested beautifully. His foundation was strong. His drives were balanced. Whatever damage Briggs's overtraining had started, it hadn't gone deep enough to break him. Yet. "Coda's your best asset," Carmen told Decker. "Protect him, rotate his training, never more than 2 high-intensity sessions a week. Briggs has him on 5. Not anymore." Then it was Athena's turn. Ramirez went to the kennel himself. He opened the gate and knelt down, the tennis ball in his hand. "Hey, girl. Hey, Athena. Come on, come here." Athena didn't move. Ramirez looked back at Carmen with agony in his eyes. "She won't even—" "Don't force it." Carmen moved forward slowly and knelt beside Ramirez. "Put the ball on the ground, just inside the gate, then back up. Give her space." Ramirez placed the tennis ball on the concrete and stepped back. The 3 of them, Carmen, Decker, and Ramirez, stood 10 feet from the open kennel gate and waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3. Carmen's knees ached from the crouch, but she didn't shift, didn't fidget, didn't make a sound. At the 4-minute mark, Athena's nose twitched. It was subtle, barely visible, but Carmen caught it. The dog had registered the ball. Somewhere in her shut-down brain, a spark had flickered. At 6 minutes, Athena lifted her head, just slightly, just enough to look at the tennis ball with one eye. "Nobody move," Carmen breathed. At 8 minutes, Athena stretched her neck forward and sniffed the air. Then she pulled back and laid her head down again. But her eyes stayed open, and they were no longer dull. Something was stirring behind them. "That's enough for today," Carmen said. Ramirez looked crushed. But she didn't even... She lifted her head. "Ramirez, 2 days ago she wouldn't have done that. Trust me, this is progress. How long is this going to take?" Carmen put her hand on his shoulder. "As long as Athena needs. Not a second less." They secured the kennel and were walking back toward the main compound when Briggs appeared. He stepped out from behind the equipment shed like he'd been waiting there the whole time, and knowing Briggs, he probably had. "Morning exercises without my authorization," he said flatly. "I don't need your authorization," Carmen replied. "As of yesterday, K9 operations on this base fall under Project Guardian. My protocols, my schedule, my call." "Project Guardian." Briggs said the words like they tasted rotten. "Yeah, I heard about that. Real impressive. Some bureaucrat in Washington signs a piece of paper, and suddenly you think you run my dogs. I don't think Briggs, I know. And the first thing I know is that Reaper is coming off bite work effective immediately." Briggs went still. Not the calm stillness from the day before. This was something harder, something that had edges. "You're pulling my primary assault dog off training. I'm pulling a physiologically compromised animal off a protocol that's destroying him. Reaper is showing chronic stress indicators consistent with adrenal fatigue. If you deploy him in his current state, he will redirect. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. He's fine." He growled at me from 8 feet away during a stationary assessment. He showed lateral aggression on the left side, which tells me someone has been jerking his lead hard enough and often enough to create a pain association. And his pupils haven't returned to normal dilation since I've been watching him. Carmen stepped closer. "He is not fine, Briggs, and if you put that dog in the field, someone is going to get hurt." Briggs's neck was crimson. His hands were fists at his sides. "You've been here 2 days. 2 days, and you're going to stand there and tell me my dogs are broken. Your dogs aren't broken. Your methods are." The silence that followed was so heavy it pressed against Carmen's eardrums. Decker had gone completely still. Ramirez looked like he wanted to dissolve into the ground. Even Coda, who had followed Carmen from the kennel, sat motionless at her heel. Briggs took 1 step forward. His voice dropped to a whisper that was worse than any shout. "You have no idea what you've started, Hayes. No idea. You think your little piece of paper protects you? You think Whitfield's name on a document means anything out here? These are my men. This is my team. And when the time comes, and it will come, they're going to have to choose between following you and following me." He leaned in so close she could count the capillaries in his eyes. "And you're going to lose that fight." He turned and walked away. Decker exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for a year. "Well, that went great." "He's scared," Carmen said, watching Briggs disappear into the operations building. "Briggs doesn't get scared. Everyone gets scared when they're losing control. He built his identity around these dogs and this team. I'm not just challenging his methods. I'm threatening who he is. That doesn't make him less dangerous. No, it makes him more dangerous, which is why I need to move fast." Carmen spent the rest of that day building her assessment report. She commandeered a desk in the operations building, spread her notes across every available surface, and wrote with the intensity of someone defusing a bomb. Which in a way she was. Every finding she documented was another piece of evidence against Briggs's program. Every recommendation she made was another step toward replacing his authority with her own. And every hour that passed was another hour Briggs had to plan his counterattack. At 1400, Vasquez appeared at her desk. He dropped into the chair across from her without being invited and crossed his arms. "You're making a lot of noise for someone who just got here." "Good afternoon to you too, Vasquez." Briggs called a meeting. Just the operators, no support staff, no handlers, and definitely no you. Carmen stopped writing. When right now, back room of the rec building. What's the agenda? Officially team cohesion discussion. Unofficially, Vasquez shrugged. He's building his case against you, getting the guys on his side, making sure that when the time comes to push you out, he's got a unified front. And you're telling me this because Vasquez leaned forward, because I was in that compound when Coda charged you. I saw what you did, and I've been watching Reaper deteriorate for months while Briggs told us everything was fine. Maybe everything isn't fine. Maybe you're the person who actually knows what she's talking about. He paused. Or maybe you're just another outsider who's going to blow through here and leave us to clean up the mess. I haven't decided yet, but I figured you should know what's happening behind your back. Thank you, Vasquez. Don't thank me, just don't make me regret this. He left and Carmen sat staring at her notes with a cold knot forming in her stomach. Briggs was organizing. He was doing exactly what any good tactician would do, securing his allies, defining the battlefield, and isolating his enemy. And she was the enemy. She picked up her phone and dialed Captain Mercer. Mercer answered on the second ring. Hayes, report. Briggs is rallying the team against me. He's holding a closed meeting right now. Operators only. Mercer was quiet for a beat. Expected. What's your assessment of team alignment? Decker is with me. Ramirez is with me, but quiet about it. Vasquez is on the fence, but leaning my way. The rest are unknowns. That's not enough. I know. Then you need to give them something Briggs can't. Results, tangible, visible, undeniable results, not paperwork, not protocols, something they can see with their own eyes. I'm working on it. Work faster. Whitfield's giving you 30 days to prove this concept works. If the team hasn't bought in by then, Guardian gets shelved and you get reassigned. 30 days. 28 now. Clock's ticking. Hayes. Mercer hung up. Carmen set the phone down and pressed her palms against her eyes until she saw stars. 28 days, 4 weeks to change a culture that had been calcifying for 6 years under a man who would rather burn the whole thing down than admit he was wrong. She needed a win, a big, undeniable public win that even Briggs couldn't spin. She needed Athena. That evening, Carmen went back to the kennels alone. The compound was quiet. The handlers had gone to chow. The dogs were settling into their nighttime routines, some pacing, some chewing on toys, some lying still. Athena was in the same position as that morning, flat on her side, eyes open, staring at nothing. But the tennis ball had moved. Carmen knelt at the kennel gate and stared. The ball which Ramirez had placed just inside the gate was now about 2 feet further into the kennel, closer to Athena. Something had moved it, and the only someone in this kennel was a dog who supposedly wouldn't move for anything. You touched it, Carmen whispered, when nobody was watching, when nobody was asking you to perform. You got up and you touched it. Athena's ear rotated toward Carmen's voice. Just a fraction. Just enough to say I hear you. Carmen reached into her pocket and pulled out a small piece of freeze-dried liver. She placed it on the ground next to the ball, right at the edge of where Athena would have to stretch to reach it. I'll be back tomorrow, she said. Same time, and I'm going to keep coming back every single day until you're ready. She stood up, and as she turned to leave, she heard it. A sound so small it barely existed. A whisper of movement on concrete. She looked back. Athena had stretched her neck forward and taken the treat. Carmen's eyes blurred. She blinked hard and fast and clenched her jaw because she would not cry in this compound. Not where anyone could see. Not where Briggs could use it against her. But in that tiny moment, that small stretch of a broken dog's neck toward a piece of liver, Carmen saw the beginning of something. Not just Athena's recovery, something bigger. She walked back to her quarters in the dark, and halfway there she passed the rec building where Briggs's meeting was still going. She could hear voices through the walls. She couldn't make out words, but she could hear the rhythm. Briggs talking, long pauses, then murmurs of agreement. He was winning them over. One by one, word by word. Carmen stopped walking. She stood in the darkness between the buildings and felt the weight of everything pressing down on her. 28 days, a hostile team, a broken taw, a man who wanted her gone, and a program that would die if she failed. Her phone buzzed. A text from Decker. Meeting just ended, not good. Briggs told them Guardian is a temporary assignment and you'll be gone in a month. Most of the guys believe him. Watch yourself tomorrow. Carmen stared at the screen. Then she typed back 2 words. I'm ready. She pocketed the phone and kept walking. Past the rec building, past the operations center, past the kennels where 6 dogs slept in the dark, each one carrying the weight of decisions made by humans who should have known better. She reached her quarters, opened the door, and sat on the edge of her bunk without turning on the light. Atlas's photograph was a shadow on the desk beside her. 28 days, she said to the empty room. Then she opened her laptop and started writing a training plan that would either save her career, save these dogs, and change the way the United States military used its most valuable 4-legged assets, or it would blow up in her face so spectacularly that no one would ever trust a K-9 specialist with this kind of authority again. Carmen typed until her fingers ached, until the words blurred on the screen, until the sky outside her window began to lighten with the first gray promise of another day in a place that didn't want her. And somewhere in Kennel 1, Athena slept with a tennis ball pressed against her chest. Day 4, Carmen hadn't slept more than 3 hours. She'd finished the training plan at 0300 and printed 2 copies, one for Rawlings, one for Mercer. By the time she walked into the compound at 0515, the plan was already in Rawlings's inbox, and her body was running on coffee and adrenaline and something deeper than both. Decker was waiting at the kennels, so was Ramirez. And standing next to Ramirez, arms folded and jaw set, was Vasquez. Carmen stopped. Vasquez, don't read into it, he said. I'm here to watch, that's all. Fair enough. They started with Athena. Carmen had Ramirez open the kennel gate the same way as yesterday. Slow, quiet, no pressure. He placed the tennis ball inside. Stepped back. They waited. This time Athena lifted her head after 2 minutes. Not 4, not 6. 2. Ramirez inhaled sharply. Carmen held up a hand to keep him quiet. Athena looked at the ball, looked at Ramirez. Then slowly, painfully slowly, she stretched her front legs forward and dragged her body 3 inches closer to the gate. Oh my God, Ramirez whispered. Don't react, Carmen said softly. Don't praise her, don't move. Let her decide. Athena stopped. She lay there with her chin on her paws, eyes moving between the 3 humans standing outside her kennel. Carmen could see the calculation happening in the dog's mind. Risk versus reward, trust versus self-protection. The memory of pain versus the possibility that pain might not come this time. Athena reached forward and took the ball in her mouth. She didn't chew it, she didn't play with it. She just held it gently like it was something precious she'd forgotten she was allowed to have. Ramirez's hand was over his mouth, his shoulders were shaking. Decker put a hand on his back. Vasquez uncrossed his arms. All right, he said quietly. I'm not just watching anymore. What do you need? Carmen assigned tasks. Vasquez would assist with Reaper's decompression protocol, taking the dog through low-intensity scent work in the obstacle course. Decker would continue running Coda Thor Gunner and Shadow through revised training sequences. Ramirez would work exclusively with Athena under Carmen's direct supervision. They worked through the morning, no incidents, no confrontations, just clean, focused, purposeful training. For the first time since Carmen had arrived, the compound felt like what it was supposed to be, a place where dogs and handlers built trust together. At 0830, Briggs showed up. He walked into the compound with 2 SEALs behind him, operators named Cole and Pittman. Both men were stone-faced, both positioned slightly behind Briggs in a formation that was clearly deliberate. Briggs was making a statement. He had his people, and his people had his back. Hayes, Briggs stopped at the edge of the training area. What are you doing with Reaper? Carmen didn't stop what she was doing. She was kneeling beside Vasquez, watching Reaper work a scent trail through a series of boxes. The dog's body language had already changed: lower tail, softer ears, rhythmic breathing, instead of the rigid panting she'd seen the day before. 12 hours off bite work, and the difference was visible. Scent work, Carmen said without looking up. Low arousal enrichment, part of his decompression protocol. I didn't authorize a decompression protocol. You don't need to authorize it, Briggs. I explained this yesterday. And I'm explaining to you today that Reaper has a deployment evaluation in 9 days. He needs to be at peak readiness. Running him through scent boxes isn't going to prepare him for a live operation. Carmen stood up. She faced Briggs directly. Cole and Pittman loomed behind him. Reaper is not deploying in 9 days. The compound went silent. Even the people seemed to feel the shift. Excuse me, Briggs said. His stress indicators are critical. His behavioral profile shows escalating aggression with diminished handler control. Deploying him in this state is a danger to every operator in the field. I've flagged him as non-deployable in my assessment, and that assessment goes to Rawlings and Mercer today. You can't pull a dog from deployment rotation. I already did. Briggs took 2 steps toward her. Cole and Pittman followed. Vasquez straightened up from the scent boxes. Decker stopped what he was doing across the compound. The tension was instant, electric, suffocating. You're going to regret this, Hayes. Briggs's voice was low and controlled the voice of a man who had learned to weaponize calm. Every decision you make here has consequences. Every dog you pull, every protocol you change, every man you turn against me. There will be a reckoning. And when it comes, your fancy classified program won't save you. Is that a threat, Briggs? It's a promise. He turned and walked away. Cole and Pittman followed. As they crossed the compound, Cole glanced back at Carmen with something that might have been doubt. Not allegiance, not yet, but the first hairline crack in Briggs's unified front. Carmen noticed it, filed it away. Every crack mattered. That afternoon, Carmen submitted her full assessment to Rawlings. 23 pages, 6 dog profiles, 12 protocol violations, 3 urgent recommendations, including Reaper's removal from deployment status. Rawlings read it in silence while Carmen stood at attention in his office. When he finished, he set the report down and rubbed his eyes. This is thorough. Thank you, sir. It's also going to start a war. The war already started, sir. I'm just fighting it with data instead of ego. Rawlings looked at her for a long time. I'm going to approve Reaper's removal from deployment, and I'm going to implement your revised training schedule on a trial basis. 2 weeks. If the dogs show measurable improvement, we make it permanent. If not, we revert to Briggs's protocols and you lose your operational authority. 2 weeks is tight, sir. 2 weeks is what I can give you without losing this team entirely. Briggs has support, more than you think, and if I push too hard, too fast, I won't have a team to command. Understood, sir. Hayes, one more thing. Rawlings stood and walked to the window. He stood with his back to her, hands clasped behind him. I've been commanding special operators for 22 years. I've seen every kind of conflict a team can have. Personality clashes, chain of command disputes, turf wars. They all end the same way. Either somebody wins or everybody loses. He turned to face her. Don't let everybody lose. Carmen saluted and left. The next 6 days were the hardest of Carmen's career. Harder than Cerberus selection. Harder than her first deployment. Harder than the night in Raqqa when everything went wrong, and the only thing that kept her alive was a dog named Atlas and a prayer she didn't know she was saying. Because this wasn't a physical test. It wasn't a tactical problem with a tactical solution. This was a human problem, and human problems don't respond to commands. They don't heal on cue. They bite when you least expect it. Briggs worked systematically. Every day he found a new way to undermine Carmen without technically violating any regulation. Day 5, he scheduled a full team conditioning run at the exact time Carmen had reserved the training area for Athena's rehabilitation session, forcing her to relocate to a muddy patch behind the motor pool. Day 6, he reassigned Ramirez to vehicle maintenance for the morning, pulling her only Athena-dedicated handler away without explanation or notice. Day 7, he filed a formal complaint with Rawlings alleging that Carmen's decompression protocol was degrading Reaper's operational readiness and putting the team at risk for their upcoming mission cycle. Carmen countered each move. She adjusted her schedule. She trained Athena alone when Ramirez wasn't available. She responded to Briggs's complaint with a 5-page rebuttal backed by veterinary research from the Army's own Canine Behavioral Science Division. But the toll was real. She was eating 1 meal a day, sleeping in fragments, running on the kind of sustained stress that she knew from years of studying it in dogs could break anyone if it went on long enough. On day 8, something changed. Carmen was working with Athena in the early morning. The dog had made remarkable progress in just 4 days. She was coming out of her kennel voluntarily now, following Ramirez to the training area, accepting treats from his hand. She still wouldn't engage in any structured work. No commands, no drills, no pressure. But she was present. She was choosing to be near people again. And every day the light in her eyes got a little brighter. This particular morning, Carmen had Ramirez toss the tennis ball a few feet in front of Athena. Not to her, not at her, just out in front, loose and easy with no expectation. Athena watched the ball bounce once, twice, and roll to a stop. Then she stood up, walked to the ball, picked it up, and brought it back to Ramirez. Ramirez froze. His hand trembled as Athena dropped the ball at his feet and looked up at him with soft eyes and a tail that moved just once, just a little, but it moved. "Oh, God!" Ramirez said, his voice cracking. "Oh, good girl. Good girl, Athena." He knelt down and Athena pressed her head into his chest. He wrapped his arms around her neck and buried his face in her fur, and his shoulders shook with the kind of silent crying that men do when they think the world is watching. Carmen stepped back. Decker, standing nearby, turned away and wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Even Vasquez, who had been maintaining a careful emotional distance, swallowed hard and looked at the ground. "Hayes?" A voice from behind them. Carmen turned. It was Cole, Briggs's man, the operator who had followed Briggs out of the compound 3 days ago without question. He was standing alone, no Briggs, no Pittman, his hands in his pockets, and an expression on his face that Carmen hadn't seen before. "I saw what just happened," Cole said. "Okay. Athena hasn't retrieved anything in 2 months. I know because I asked Ramirez about it 3 weeks ago, and he told me she wouldn't even stand up. Briggs said she was a lost cause, said she'd wash out by summer." "She's not a lost cause. I can see that now." Cole shifted his weight. "Look, I'm not going to pretend I was on your side. I wasn't. Briggs has earned a lot of loyalty from this team, and I owe him more than I can explain. But I've also watched him run these dogs into the ground for the past year and tell us it was normal. It's not normal. I know that now." "What are you saying, Cole?" "I'm saying I want to learn. Whatever you're doing with these dogs, however you're doing it, teach me." Carmen felt something shift in her chest, not victory, something quieter, something that felt like the first day of a season changing. "Tomorrow morning, 05:30, bring Gunner. I'll show you how to read his stress signals." Cole nodded and walked away. Carmen watched him go and allowed herself one moment, just one, to feel the weight lift slightly from her shoulders. That night, she called Mercer. "I have Cole," she said. "Briggs's Cole. Former Briggs's Cole. He came to me today after watching Athena's breakthrough." Mercer was quiet for a moment. "That's significant. How many do you have now?" "Decker, Ramirez, Vasquez, and now Cole. 4 operators plus me. Briggs still has Pittman and at least 3 others solidly in his camp. That's a split team. Rawlings won't like it. Rawlings won't have to deal with it for long. Give me the rest of these 2 weeks and I'll have the dogs speaking for themselves." Results are louder than Briggs. They'd better be. Whitfield is getting pressure from above. There are people in the Pentagon who think Guardian is a waste of resources. If you don't deliver something undeniable, this program dies and it takes your career with it. "I understand." "Do you? Because I need you to understand something else. If Guardian fails, it won't just be your career. It'll set back the entire military working dog community by a decade. Every handler who's been fighting for better protocols, better training, better treatment of these animals, they're all watching you, Hayes, whether they know it or not." Carmen closed her eyes. "No pressure. All the pressure. That's the job. Good night, Hayes." Day 10, 1400 hours. Carmen was running Coda through an advanced tactical obedience sequence, testing his ability to switch between commands in rapid succession when the compound gate opened and a vehicle she didn't recognize pulled in. 3 men got out. 2 were in uniform, officers from a unit Carmen didn't identify. The third was a civilian in khakis and a polo shirt carrying a clipboard and wearing the confident expression of someone who evaluated things for a living. Rawlings came out to meet them. Carmen watched from a distance as handshakes were exchanged and Rawlings led them toward the operations building. As they passed the training area, the civilian looked directly at Carmen, then at Coda, then back at Carmen. He made a note on his clipboard. "Who are they?" Carmen asked Decker. Decker's face had gone pale. "The 2 officers are from JSOC Evaluation Command. They do readiness assessments for high-value mission packages." "And the civilian?" "No idea. But if JSOC Eval is here, it means a mission is coming. A real one. And they're here to decide if this team is ready." Carmen's stomach dropped. A readiness assessment would evaluate everything: personnel, equipment, tactics, and canine assets. If the evaluators determined that the dogs weren't mission ready because of Carmen's protocol changes, Briggs would have all the ammunition he needed to destroy Guardian. But if the dogs performed well, If they showed improvement under her program, it would be the undeniable proof she needed. Everything came down to this. 2 hours later, Rawlings called a full team meeting. Every operator, every handler, every support staff member assigned to the unit gathered in the briefing room. Briggs was in the front row, arms crossed, face unreadable. Carmen stood in the back near the door. "Listen up," Rawlings said. "JSOC has assigned us a Tier 1 mission package. Details are classified pending security briefing, but I can tell you this. It's a compound clearance operation in a hostile urban environment, multi-structure target, high-value individual, and it requires K-9 support." The room tensed. Carmen felt every eye in the room calculate and recalculate. "The evaluation team will assess our readiness over the next 4 days. If we pass, we deploy. If we don't, the package goes to another unit." Rawlings paused. "I don't need to tell you what that would mean for this team's reputation." Briggs spoke first. "Which dogs are we running?" "That's what the evaluation will determine. All 6 dogs will be assessed. The eval team will select based on performance, handler compatibility, and operational fitness." "All 6 dogs," Briggs repeated, and his eyes moved to Carmen, "including the ones currently on restricted training protocols. Including all of them." Carmen felt the trap close around her. Reaper was still in decompression. Athena was recovering, but nowhere near operational readiness. If those dogs were evaluated alongside the others, their current performance would look like failure. Briggs's dogs would shine. Carmen's recovery program would look like it had weakened the unit. Briggs knew it. The smile that crossed his face was subtle enough that only Carmen caught it, and it was the coldest thing she'd ever seen. After the briefing, Carmen caught Rawlings in the hallway. "Sir, I need to speak with you." "Make it quick, Hayes." "Reaper and Athena are in active rehabilitation. Evaluating them against operational ready dogs is like comparing a patient in physical therapy to an Olympic athlete. The comparison isn't fair, and it doesn't reflect the program's effectiveness." "I understand your concern, but the eval team assesses what they assess. I can't tell JSOC to skip 2 of our 6 dogs." "Then let me brief the evaluators on the dog's current status. Give them context." "I'll allow it, but the final assessment is theirs, not ours." Rawlings lowered his voice. "Hayes, I need something from you in the next 4 days. I need at least 4 dogs to pass that evaluation." 4 out of 6. Can you give me that? Coda, Thor, Gunner, and Shadow are solid. They'll pass. And Reaper, Athena. Carmen hesitated. Reaper had shown improvement, but 10 days of decompression wasn't enough to undo months of damage. Athena had made a breakthrough, but retrieving a tennis ball was a universe away from clearing a compound under fire. "I'll do everything I can, sir." "That's not a yes." "No, sir, it's not." Rawlings nodded and walked away. Carmen stood alone in the hallway, feeling the walls close in for the second time in 10 days. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Heard about the eval. Heard about your dogs. TikTok specialist." No signature, but Carmen didn't need one. She deleted the message and walked to the kennels. It was nearly 2100. The compound was dark. The dogs were quiet. She went to Athena's kennel and knelt at the gate. Athena was lying on her bed, the tennis ball between her front paws. When Carmen appeared, the dog lifted her head and her tail swayed twice. "Hey girl," Carmen said, "we've got a problem." Athena stood up. She walked to the gate and pressed her nose through the chain link, touching Carmen's fingers. "They're going to test you in 4 days, and I know you're not ready. I know you've been through hell and you're just starting to remember who you are. But I need you to trust me. I need you to trust Ramirez. And I need you to dig deeper than you've ever dug before." Athena licked her fingers. Carmen pressed her forehead against the chain link and closed her eyes. "I won't let them break you again. I swear it. Whatever happens in that evaluation, I will protect you, even if it costs me everything." She stayed there for a long time, forehead against cold metal, a dog's warm breath on her skin. Then she stood up, dried her eyes, and walked to her quarters. She had 4 days. 4 days to prepare 6 dogs for an evaluation that would determine the fate of her program, her career, and every military working dog that came after. She opened her laptop, pulled up the training plan, and started rewriting everything from scratch. At 0200, her phone buzzed again. This time it was Decker. "Cole just talked to Pittman. Pittman's wavering. Briggs is losing his grip. Whatever you're planning for this eval, make it count. Carmen typed back one word: watch. Carmen didn't sleep the night before the evaluation. She sat on the edge of her bunk with Atlas's photograph in her hands and ran through every scenario in her mind, every possible outcome, every way it could go wrong, every way Briggs could use the next 24 hours to bury her. At 0400, she got up, laced her boots, and walked to the kennels in the dark. She checked every dog. Gunner was alert, calm, ready. Shadow was settled, ears relaxed, breathing steady. Thor lay on his bed like a king on a throne, unbothered by anything the world had to offer. Coda pressed against his kennel gate when he saw Carmen and whined softly until she scratched his ear through the chain link. Reaper was the wild card. 10 days of decompression had brought his baseline down significantly. His pupils were normal. His body language had softened. He no longer growled when someone approached from the left. But 10 days wasn't enough to fully rebuild what months of overtraining had damaged, and Carmen knew it. She had done everything she could in the time she had. The rest was up to the dog. Then there was Athena. Carmen knelt at Kennel 1 and looked at the dog who had become the heartbeat of everything she was fighting for. Athena was awake, lying on her bed with a tennis ball between her paws. When she saw Carmen, she stood up, walked to the gate, and sat. Calm, present, eyes clear. "Today's the day, girl," Carmen whispered. "I'm not going to lie to you. It's going to be hard. There's going to be mass and pressure and people watching you. And every part of your brain is going to tell you to shut down again, to go back to that corner and disappear." Athena tilted her head. "But I need you to remember something. You are not what happened to you. You are what you chose to become after. And you chose to come back. You chose to pick up that ball. You chose to trust Ramirez again. Nobody made you do that. That was you." Carmen pressed her palm flat against the chain link. Athena pressed her nose against it from the other side. "Whatever happens today, I'm proud of you. And I'm going to be right there, every second." She stood up, dried her face with her sleeve, and walked back to her quarters to prepare. The evaluation team arrived at 0700. The civilian with the clipboard, whose name turned out to be Dr. Martin Falk, was a behavioral scientist contracted by JSOC to assess K9 operational readiness. The two officers, Major Hendricks and Captain Liu, handled the tactical and personnel components. Rawlings assembled the full team in the briefing room for a final overview. Carmen stood along the wall. Briggs sat in the front row, his posture perfect, his expression radiating confidence. He'd been preparing for this too. She could see it in the sharpness of his uniform, the precision of his bearing. This was his stage and he intended to perform. "The evaluation will proceed in 3 phases, Major Hendricks announced. Phase 1, individual dog assessments, obedience drive, handler responsiveness. Phase 2, tactical simulation, a compound clearance exercise using 2 selected dogs. Phase 3, post-exercise behavioral evaluation. Dr. Falk will observe throughout and provide an independent assessment." Hendricks looked at the room. "Questions?" Briggs raised his hand. "Sir, I want to flag that 2 of our 6 dogs have been placed on restricted training protocols by our newly assigned K9 specialist. Reaper and Athena have been off standard training for over a week. I want that noted for the record." "Noted," Hendricks said. "Hayes, you requested a briefing opportunity. You have 2 minutes." Carmen stepped forward, every eye in the room locked on her. Briggs's smile was barely contained. "Reaper and Athena were placed on modified protocols because both dogs were exhibiting signs of chronic stress that compromised their operational effectiveness and handler safety. Reaper showed escalating redirected aggression. Athena was in full behavioral shutdown. The modifications I implemented are based on evidence-based decompression techniques used in the Cerberus program and supported by the Army's Canine Behavioral Science Division." She paused. "I'm not asking for special consideration. I'm asking that the evaluation team assess these dogs based on where they are now relative to where they were 10 days ago. The trajectory matters as much as the snapshot." Dr. Falk made a note. Hendricks nodded. "Understood. Let's proceed." Phase 1 began at 0800. Each dog was brought to the training area individually and run through a standardized assessment by their assigned handler. Gunner went first and performed flawlessly. Shadow followed with a clean run. Her earlier hesitation on recall completely resolved after Carmen's adjustments. Thor moved through the sequence with the quiet authority of a dog who had done this 1,000 times and could do it 1,000 more. Coda was next. Decker handled him, and Carmen watched from the sideline with her heart in her throat. Coda hit every mark. Sit down. Heel recall, all crisp, all immediate. When Decker ran him through a controlled bite work sequence on a padded decoy, Coda engaged and released on command with textbook precision. Dr. Falk stopped writing and simply watched his eyebrows, climbing higher with each repetition. Impressive animal, Falk said to Carmen as Decker brought Coda back. His engagement to release ratio is one of the cleanest I've seen in a military working dog. That's the result of balanced training, Carmen said. Appropriate drive stimulation with adequate recovery intervals. No shortcuts. Falk looked at her over his clipboard. You restructured his training schedule. I did, 10 days ago. 10 days and you've got results like this. The foundation was already there. I just stopped someone from destroying it. She said it loud enough for Briggs to hear. She meant to. Reaper was fifth. Vasquez brought him out and Carmen held her breath. The dog moved differently than he had 10 days ago. Looser, calmer. His eyes scanned the environment with awareness instead of paranoia. When Vasquez gave the heel command, Reaper fell into position without the rigid tension that had characterized his movement before. He wasn't perfect. There was a moment during the recall where he hesitated, his eyes darting left, the ghost of a pain association still flickering in his neural pathways. But he recovered. He came when called, he sat when told, and when Vasquez ran him through a basic detection exercise instead of bite work, Reaper's whole demeanor transformed. His tail came up, his nose went to work. He was a don doing what he was built to do, finding things, solving problems, using his brain instead of his teeth. Dr. Falk made extensive notes. Major Hendricks leaned over and said something to Captain Lou that Carmen couldn't hear. Then it was Athena. Ramirez walked to Kennel 1. Carmen followed. The rest of the team, including Briggs, gathered along the fence line to watch. You ready? Carmen asked Ramirez. No. Good. That means you care. Open the gate. Ramirez opened the gate. Athena stood inside looking at him. The tennis ball was at her feet. Come on, girl, Ramirez said softly. Come on. Athena picked up the tennis ball, walked through the gate, and stood beside Ramirez. Her tail was low but moving. Her eyes were cautious but clear. She was scared. Carmen could see it in the slight tremor along her flanks, the way her ears rotated at every sound. But she was there, standing, present, choosing to be in the open. They walked to the evaluation area. Dr. Falk was watching intently. Hendricks had his arms crossed. Carmen positioned herself 10 feet away, close enough to intervene if needed, far enough to let Athena work. Basic obedience sequence, Carmen told Ramirez. Start with sit, go slow. Athena sit, Ramirez said. Athena sat, immediately, cleanly, like she'd been waiting for someone to ask. Down, she dropped into a down. Heel. She moved to his left side and matched his pace as he walked a 20-foot line. Her eyes stayed on his face. Her body moved with fluid precision. The compound was dead silent. Recall, Carmen said. Send her out. Call her back. Ramirez unclipped the lead. Athena, wait. He walked 20 feet away, turned and called her. Athena, come. She launched forward. Not with the explosive drive of a Coda or a Reaper. With something else. Something that made Carmen's throat close and her vision blur. Athena ran to Ramirez with joy. Pure, uncomplicated, unbroken joy. The kind that comes from an animal who has been given back the one thing that was taken from her. Trust. She hit Ramirez's legs and sat at his feet, looking up at him with bright eyes and a wagging tail. And Ramirez knelt down and held her head in both hands and said, That's my girl. That's my girl. Dr. Falk set his clipboard down. He took off his glasses and cleaned them. When he put them back on, his eyes were red. Behind the fence, Vasquez was nodding slowly. Cole had his hand over his mouth. Decker was smiling for the first time since Carmen had met him. And Briggs was standing perfectly still, staring at Athena like he was watching his own empire crack. Pittman, standing beside Briggs, took one step sideways, away from him, just one step. But it was the step that broke the line. Phase 2 began at 1300. The tactical simulation required 2 dogs to clear a mock compound, a multi-room structure used for urban warfare training. Hendricks selected Coda, and to everyone's surprise, Athena. Briggs erupted. You're putting that dog in a live simulation. She's been on restricted protocols for 10 days. She hasn't done tactical work in 2 months. Hendricks didn't blink. Dr. Falk's recommendation. He wants to see her perform under operational conditions. If you have a concern, note it for the record. I'm noting it right now. This is reckless. Noted. Proceed. Carmen pulled Ramirez aside. Listen to me. Athena's obedience is back. Her drive is recovering at Bayam, but this is a high-stress environment, and she hasn't worked tactically in weeks. If she shows any signs of shutdown, any hesitation, any freezing, you pull her out immediately. Her recovery is more important than this evaluation. Do you understand? What if pulling her out fails the eval? Then we fail. I will not sacrifice that dog for a score. Not today, not ever. Ramirez nodded. His jaw was tight, but his eyes were steady. He clipped Athena's tactical lead and moved to the starting position. Decker handled Coda. The two teams would enter the compound from opposite sides and clear toward the center. Standard pincer movement. The evaluators would be watching handler control, dog responsiveness, room clearing technique, and stress management. Executed, Hendricks called. Decker and Coda went through the left entrance. Ramirez and Athena went right. Carmen stood at the observation point, and with Rawlings, Hendricks, Liu, and Falk. Briggs positioned himself at the far end, arms crossed, waiting for failure. Coda cleared 3 rooms in 90 seconds. Flawless. Fast entries, immediate searches, instant alerts on hidden decoys. Decker moved behind him like a shadow, calling commands with crisp authority. They were a machine. Ramirez and Athena entered the right side. First room. Ramirez gave the search command. Athena moved forward, nose working, body tense, but controlled. She swept the room, found nothing, and returned to Ramirez's side. Second room. Athena entered ahead of Ramirez. A hidden decoy was behind a barrier. Athena's body stiffened, her ears pinned back. Carmen gripped the railing in front of her. Come on, she whispered. Come on, girl. You know what to do. Athena's nose twitched. Her ears came forward. She barked once sharp and clear, alerting on the decoy's position. Ramirez called the confirmation, and Athena held her alert until he released her. Clean alert, Dr. Falk said, making a note. Excellent recovery from initial startle. Third room. This was the hard one. Multiple decoys overlapping scent trails, a loud noise generator designed to simulate gunfire. Everything that had broken Athena before was concentrated in this room. Ramirez hesitated at the door. Carmen could see his hand trembling on the lead. Trust her, Carmen called out. She didn't care who heard. Trust your dog, Ramirez. Ramirez took a breath. Athena, search. Athena plunged into the room. The noise generator fired, a percussive blast that rattled the walls and made every human in the compound flinch. Athena flinched too, her body contracted, her tail tucked. For one terrible eternal second, she froze. Carmen stopped breathing. Then Athena shook it off, physically shook her body the way dogs do when they're resetting, and drove forward. She found the first decoy in 4 seconds. Alerted, found the second in 6, alerted again. Cleared the rest of the room and returned to Ramirez's side, panting hard but standing tall. Ramirez's eyes were streaming. He didn't wipe them. He just looked down at his dog and said, I knew it. I knew you still had it. Carmen released the railing. Her fingers were white from gripping it. Behind her, she heard Rawlings exhale a breath he'd been holding for 2 minutes. Dr. Falk turned to Hendricks. I've seen enough. The debrief took place at 1600. The full team gathered in the briefing room. Carmen stood in the back again, but this time Decker stood next to her, and Vasquez, and Cole, and Ramirez with Athena's lead still wrapped around his hand like he couldn't bear to let go. Hendricks spoke first. This team passes the readiness evaluation. The K9 assets demonstrated operational capability across all measured criteria. Coda and Athena are recommended for the mission package. The room erupted. Not in cheers, SEALs don't cheer, but in the sharp release of tension that sounds like shuffling boots and muttered, hell yes, and someone slapping someone else on the back. Briggs sat motionless. Dr. Falk stood and addressed the room. I want to add something to the official record. In my 12 years of evaluating military working dogs, I have never seen a rehabilitation as rapid or as effective as what Specialist Hayes achieved with the bomb-designated Athena. 10 days ago, that animal was in complete behavioral shutdown. Today, she cleared a tactical simulation under combat stress conditions with clean alerts and handler-responsive recovery. He looked at Carmen. Specialist Hayes, your methods are not just effective. They represent a fundamental advancement in how we train, manage, and deploy K9 assets. I will be recommending to JSOC that Project Guardian receive full operational funding and expansion authority. The room was silent. Carmen felt every word land like a stone dropped into still water. Rawlings spoke. Thank you, Dr. Falk. Thank you, Major Hendricks, Captain Liu. He paused. I also want to address something that everyone in this room has been aware of, but nobody has said out loud. This team has been divided. Specialist Hayes arrived under circumstances that were hostile, and she faced opposition that went beyond professional disagreement. She was tested in ways that were unfair, unsafe, and beneath the standard of this unit. He looked directly at Briggs. That ends today. Project Guardian is now a permanent component of this unit's operational structure. Specialist Hayes has full authority over all K9 training's deployment and handler development. Anyone who has a problem with that can request a transfer. Briggs stood up. The room held its breath. He looked at Carmen for a long time. His face was unreadable. Then he turned to Rawlings. I'd like to request a word with Specialist Hayes, in private. Rawlings looked at Carmen. She nodded. They met outside the briefing room, just the two of them in the hallway where Carmen had confronted him days ago. Briggs leaned against the wall. He looked older than he had 2 weeks ago, smaller. I'm not going to apologize, he said. I didn't ask you to. But I'm going to say something I've never said to anyone. He swallowed. I was wrong about Athena. I pushed her too hard. I broke her. And if you hadn't come here, she would have washed out, or worse. Carmen waited. I've been running dogs for 6 years, and I thought I knew everything. I thought pressure was the answer. More pressure, more drive, more aggression. That's how I was trained. That's how I trained others. He looked at the floor. But watching that dog walk into that simulation today, after what I did to her, watching her shake off that noise and keep working. His voice cracked. Just barely, just enough. That wasn't my training. That was yours, and it was better. Carmen felt the walls around her chest loosen for the first time in 2 weeks. Briggs, I didn't come here to replace you. I came here to make the dogs better. And the dogs are better when the whole team works together. I know that now. Then we start over. Tomorrow. Clean slate. You teach me what you know about fieldwork, and I teach you what I know about behavior. Deal. Briggs looked at her outstretched hand. Something moved behind his eyes, the last remnant of pride fighting against something stronger. Then he took her hand and shook it once firm and brief. Deal. He walked away. Carmen stood alone in the hallway and let the silence fill the space where the war had been. That evening, Carmen went to the kennels one last time. The compound was quiet. The dogs were settling in for the night. She walked past Gunner, Shadowthor, Reaper, Coda, each one lifting their head as she passed each one, recognizing her. Each one calm. She stopped at Athena's kennel. The dog was on her bed, the tennis ball between her paws, but this time she was different. Her tail was moving. Her eyes were bright. And when Carmen knelt at the gate, Athena got up, walked over, and licked her fingers through the chain link. You did it, girl, Carmen said. You came back. All the way back. Athena wagged her tail. Carmen reached into her pocket and pulled out Atlas's photograph. She held it up so the kennel light fell across it. A woman and a dog in Afghanistan. A bond that had started everything. I kept my promise, buddy, she said to the photo. I found them, the ones who needed me. She tucked the photo away, stood up, and looked across the compound. Somewhere in the barracks, Decker was probably cleaning his gear. Vasquez was probably running his mouth about something. Cole was probably staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything he'd learned. Ramirez was probably lying in his bunk, smiling at nothing, thinking about a dog who'd chosen to come back to him. And Briggs was probably sitting alone, wrestling with the hardest thing any soldier ever has to face. The realization that strength without understanding is just violence wearing a uniform. Carmen's phone buzzed. A message from Captain Mercer. Guardian is approved. Full funding. You're being promoted to lead the program. Congratulations, Hayes. You earned it. Carmen read the message twice. Then she put the phone in her pocket and walked across the compound under a sky full of stars that she finally had time to notice. She had come to this base as the new girl. The outsider. The one they threw into a ring with a killer dog because they thought she would break. She didn't break. She didn't fight back with fists or fury or the kind of brute force that men like Briggs understood. She fought back with knowledge, with patience, with the quiet, unshakable belief that the bond between